Good morning. I just want to pray before we begin. Father God, we just thank you for this opportunity to come together today. Father, I just pray that anything that is not of you, that you will just take it away. And I pray that everyone will leave this place this morning knowing that they've met with the risen God. Amen. I'm going to read from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 to 7. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all the mysteries and all the knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Probably one of the most amazing passages in the Word of God, this. And for lots of Christians, it might be the most favourite passage in the Bible. And Paul begins by saying, we all might have spiritual gifts. However, unless those gifts are accompanied by love, they are less than useless. So that made me think about people and how people behave. And he mentions the gift of tongues. And apparently this was very characteristic of Gentile worship to their gods in that time. Especially the worship of the Greek god of wine. I find that amazing. You get a god of wine. And his name was Dionysus. Probably because you couldn't say it when you were drunk, is what I'm thinking. And the goddess Cybele. And this worship included the banging of cymbals and the blurring of horns and trumpets. But for us, the gift of tongues must be a worship-based love. As without that love, all that noise is just noise. There's a gift of prophecy. It's said that it's quite close to preaching. And there seems to be two types of preachers. Those whose aim is to work with God himself and to save souls and to love others, and those who preach what I would call hellfire and damnation, which is the opposite, really. And it gives the impression that those types of preachers would rejoice in the damnation as much in the salvation. But there's no love. The gift of knowledge. People should be set on fire if they have a gift of knowledge. And that knowledge should be bringing the salvation message to people and based on the truth. There's faith. True faith in God stems from a pure love which will sustain you in the good times and the bad. There's a gift of charity, of giving. And I've worked for charities for like 28 years. Know lots of people. Know lots of people who are in it for their own ends. and there are certain few that are in it for the person that they serve. And your work in a charity should be driven by love of others. You should have a pure heart. It's not about you being recognised as the person who's been a do-gooder, or whatever you would like to call it. It's about glorifying God. It's about showing a God who cares about people. It's about showing a God who wants to provide for people. And it's about God who loves everybody. Now in verses 4 to 7, there are 700, not in verses 4 to 7 obviously, but there are 745 references in the Bible regarding God's love for each one of us. And in these verses, they speak to our circumstances. It describes people who are slow to anger in our dealings with other people, regardless of how much or how badly they treat us. And we are called to exercise that same patience that God exercises with each one of us. Patience is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strength. So the first love is patient. And this patience describes patience with others, so with other people, not being patient in your circumstance of life. It describes people who are slow to anger in their dealings with others, no matter how difficult and unkind they might be to them. That made me think about the shop that I work at. And I wasn't actually there on this particular day, but I've been told that some members of a family came in with a lady who wanted to buy a scooter. So she was with like a daughter-in-law, stuff like that. She went to see them and discussed the fact that she needed a scooter and ended up purchasing one on the day. Andrew spent a lot of time with her, explaining everything to her, what she had to do. And the family were all up for it. Yes, that's great. That one suits her best. That's the one we'll have. So they bought it and ordered it. And then the next day, in came the mother again, but with a different daughter. And apparently this daughter is her carer, her main carer, and spends most of the time with her. The others were members of the family, yes, but they weren't the carer. And she came in on the bounce. She was fit to kill. And she went straight for Andrew and said, "What do you think you're doing, selling a scooter to my mother?" And he went, well, I don't understand what you're saying. She said, "Well, don't you know she's blind? She's actually on the register." So she didn't have the sight to drive a scooter, but none of the others thought to tell him that. Which really threw him a curveball, if you like. So he ended up having, obviously, to refund this lady's money and give it her back. And the girl was very nice after that. But the point to me is that none of the ones that came and took her, came into the shop with her to buy it, were there. They weren't there. And why they thought it would be okay, I'll never understand that, because she was on the blind register. And Andrew is extremely patient in those situations. I'm not sure I would have been myself, but he is. And we, as Christians, are supposed to be patient. And the patience that God has with you and me when we do things that are not very nice, or we do things that are not so good. And yet still he doesn't say, "I'm not talking to you today." He talks to you every day. He loves you with a passion. The next thing I thought about was love is kind, which makes me smile when I was thinking about something that I saw in town the other day. How many of you, and I don't believe none of you don't do this, judge other people without thinking? I'm sure if I asked you to put your hands up, you'd have to put them up. Me too. saw a lady in town the other day, and she was dressed in like black t-shirt, black jeans, but she had an armful from there right to her fingertips of tattoos. They were all across her chest, all across her back, all down her other arm, and she was as old as I am. And I thought, why are you thinking badly of that? It's her choice. I have no right to think anything of that. So I thought, how often do we do that? Do we judge people by their appearance? You might see somebody. There are two types of opinions I have to tell you. But if you judge someone by their appearance, what tends to happen is that you see somebody and maybe they look absolutely amazing in a dress. Not a bloke, obviously, although it could be. And you say, that really suits you, you look really lovely. But then if you saw somebody else in the same dress, it might not suit that other person. And some people think, what does she father in that? Who does she think she is dressing like that? And I know it happens. I know I've done it myself. And I try not to do it, but you can't help yourself some days. You might be judging people on their status in life. You know, we do have an issue around, if you've got a good job and you look presentable, then clearly you must be good. You look the part. And the more I see people who come to us who are in good jobs, top of the tree jobs, who have not got any passion for the people they serve in their town, I could write a book. Just because you've got a good job and just because you're very well educated doesn't mean you're really nice. It just means you don't know God as much as I do or you do. Some people might be unemployed. And I'm sure you've seen the TV programmes that call them the scroungers and call them this and call them that and call them the other. And I've worked in the benefits system for 28 years, helping people who are sick and disabled. And yeah, there are some that are like that. I can't deny that. There are some people that actually lie to your face and tell you things that you know is not true. But I can't judge that. I'm only there to help them to do the job that I have to do. And some people are genuinely unemployed through no fault of their own. And that could be for any reason. My son, as you know, works in Ad Action. And he's met people who have had good jobs, have had good houses, have had cars, family, and lost it all, everything. And yes, you might say, well, that's their choice. Well, no, it's not always their choice. Not at all. And I can't agree with that. And you make a choice then, don't you? You either judge that person or you help them. You have to decide which side of the fence you stand. We can often feel that we have a right to an opinion on other people's circumstances. And this is the one big question I tell my daughter off for. Because she'll say to me, I'm only telling the truth, Mother, aren't I? I'm not saying anything wrong, it's the truth. And they know it's the truth. To which I have to say, yeah, but you know the truth, you know what to expect. You don't always have to say it. You don't have to always voice your own opinion. You can keep your gob shut. Very hard when you're my daughter, but I'm sure if you know it, you'll know why it is. But I have to say that Jesus expects us to be kind to everybody, because you have to understand he created everybody equal, and it doesn't matter to him whether you like him or not. You want to follow him, you are nice to them people. We are called to love the unlovable. The next bit is envy. Love does not envy. And it's not very nice to feel envy, because it can make you feel inadequate. And there are some who take delight in being blunt and almost brutal in their opinions of other people. There appear to be two types of envy when I look at it. You can be, it's like if you want the possessions of others, and the other one is if you begrudge that person having those things, because it's totally different. And it's a common human failing. We shouldn't measure ourselves against other people, because you're not that person. You are an individual, unique person created by God. And whatever you are is who you are. And God loves you no matter who you are, no matter what you are. And he wants us, his people, to be kind to other people and to love them as we love ourselves, because we do love ourselves. There are people that don't, obviously, but then they probably don't know God, really. And love doesn't boast. True love will always be more impressed with its own unworthiness than its own merit. True love is humbled by the fact it can never offer its loved one a gift which is ever good enough. And you know, we are loved by a God who died on a cross so that we could have life. And we can never repay that. That was a gift. And we'll never be good enough. But God thinks we are, because he doesn't see all that other stuff that you think you've got. Love's not proud. We can often become inflated by our own importance. We feel we're important. Especially a trait of that is you can consider yourself better than others. And that's because of their position against yours. And sometimes I see people who do that, and they treat people around them as if like, well, I'm the boss, you're a minion, you do as I say. And that's why Jesus creates us all as equal. We're all equal in his sight. None of us is better than anybody else. Doesn't matter whether you're a job's worth, whether you're a boss, whether you're the bottom rung of the ladder, whether you're at the top of your tree. The pressures of that sort of work can sometimes make you forget where you're from, really. And the same applies in the church. There's no one better than anybody else in a church. Everybody's the same in a church. We all just have different roles. Like everybody does at home. They have different roles, different jobs, different things they do. Love's not rude. Sometimes you think you're entitled to take the moral high ground and delight in pulling someone up where you think they've gone wrong. And you feel you have the right to do these things. But God demands that we treat others with respect and tact. We should always be polite, no matter how we feel and no matter whether we're right or wrong. Because you're not considering the other person's situation or their feelings and what's going on in their life. Love's not self-seeking. There are two types of people who insist on their privilege and those who remember their responsibilities. Made me think about when, in the 60s and 70s, when the groups used to go on hotels when they were on tour and smash the hotel to pieces and do all sorts of damage because they believed they had the right to do that. Okay, they could afford to pay for it, but that don't make that right, does it? It's just back to front thinking for me, that. There's some people who think about what life owes them and those who never forget what life they have and what they owe to that life. God expects us to think less of our own rights and more of our duties to treat others as we treat ourselves, and therefore be glorifying our God, that's what your job is. Love is not easily angered. God expects Christians to be saying, sometimes I think, don't say that here. God expects Christians to never become exacerbated with other people. You can try and be as patient as you like, but there'll be a point upon which you think, I'm going to have to walk away. This is driving my head nuts. And I have a brother who is not practical at all. He's got 2 university degrees and done all sorts, and he was quite high up. But he's got no common sense, my brother. And my cousin he's done his house up, took him for paint. And she tried to explain the difference, it's going to sound really stupid, between gloss paint and emulsion paint. And you know who he is, don't you? Just realise that then. And he just didn't understand it. And she said, she's an artist, so she paints and she does colours and she knows all the colours and stuff. And she said, he just doesn't get it, does he? And I went, no, he doesn't. And so we don't do it now. But it's very difficult, you see, because he's his own man and he can do his own thing. But he's never ever painted a house before. Not ever, because my mum used to do it. And to be honest, he's done a cracking job. It's amazing. And it's ready now for him to go back in. So when you lose your temper, and he went to B&Q. I'll tell you this because this is quite amusing. And he had a booklet in his hand because he was looking at kitchens and bathrooms and he was ordering it, all his stuff. And he went to this lady and he said, I can't understand why the price in the book is not the price on the stuff in the shop. And this very patient lady, apparently, because we weren't with him, was trying to explain to him why not. And he's telling our Claire this, right, and Jack. And he said, I was there for ages and she still couldn't understand it and she walked off in the end, you know. And Jack went, that's because that wasn't a B&Q book, John. That's from Home Base. She's never thought about that, you see. Because he's been to every shop this side of the River Mersey, I'm telling you. And you can get very frustrated because he's very frustrating. But if you lose your temper, there's no point because he doesn't understand it. He doesn't get it. But he's the most intelligent man I've ever met in my life. And if you can control your temper, and if you can actually see beyond that, then you can overcome anything in life. And next we have love keeps no record of wrongs. Do you know, have you ever had that thing done to you where it plays on your mind for ages and ages, and you think, next time I see that person, I am going to tell them what I think. Because I'm right and they're wrong, and I'm going to tell them. And we can't hang on to that. What it does is it destroys your personality. Because what that does is it simmers and comes to the boil. You'll brood over it. And you can't forgive when you do that. Because you allow that to completely take over your mind and your thinking. And that's very difficult to get rid of. And Christian love is the opposite to that. We must learn that lesson. We must forgive. We must always forgive those who wrong us. We might not like it, and we might still never forget it. But the point is, you have to forgive. When you can't just give it lip service, you actually have to do it. Love does not delight in evil. You always can have people who prefer to hear of your misfortune rather than your good fortune. So if they're not particularly keen on you, they find it easier to gloat, if you like, if something bad happens to you or something else happens to them. They don't think that way. And we can find it easier to weep with somebody when bad things happen, but then difficult to rejoice when we hear of their success. And that's a mindset, I think. And Christian love has got no time for that. You can't have that. You've got to get rid of it. Love rejoices with the truth. Now we can say that very easily, but it's not always very easy to do. But again, as Christians, we are required to tell the truth and should have nothing to hide. And so be glad when the truth prevails. Love always protects. Love doesn't want to drag others' mistakes and faults into the open, but would rather try to mend them quietly. Jesus shows us what true love is all about. When he bore insults, he bore injury, disappointment, punishment, and denial, and he received a death of a traitor on a cross. And yet still, dying in agony on that cross, he asked his Father to forgive him. Ask yourself, would you do that? Love always trusts. In relation to God, this means taking God at his word and believing every promise that he's made. In relation to our fellow man, it means always believing the best in people. When God believes in us, we can become better people. We do become better people. And that works because we strive to be in line with his will for us. And we have to think about how he would behave in every single set of circumstances you find yourself in. Love always hopes. Our God believes in us, and he can give us hope for the future. He sets great store in each one of us, and he's relying on us to further his kingdom in this world. Love always perseveres. We might not be able to change things that happen to us, but we can change the way we react to that circumstance. We're not meant to court sympathy when bad things happen. We're required to act like Jesus and to use those situations to conquer and change things and make it better. And we will become better people because of those situations. Jesus never reacted to his enemies. He never complained, not even when he was beaten senseless and hung on the cross and nailed on a cross. While others laughed at him, because they did. God is come up and say him now. They scoffed at him. Just look at him, what's he going to do? Get off the cross if you're God, come on. And yet still, he asked his Father to forgive them. When it seemed like all hope was lost, and the apostles were in the upper room hiding full of despair because their friend Jesus, the Messiah, was dead. And then 3 days later, the empty tomb, they were all rejoicing with a hope for the future and a way forward in life.